Welcome back to another edition of Irish Illustrated Insider. I am Tim O'Malley, joined today by Tim Priester and Drew Mentok of Irish Illustrated. And because of the natural disaster in my home, it has only been 48 hours, guys, since our last podcast. And I think the plan here was somebody had to enter the portal, but as we discussed on Tuesday, no news was the news. This is the only time I think Priester and Drew we can come on here and say we are not surprised that there were no portal entries at that deadline, and that might make this a portal-free podcast for the first time in when I don't know. I guess after the national championship game, right?
Yeah. But, uh, look, all of this is new to us. And so you don't know how it's all going to unfold. And we still go back. We talked about it extensively on Tuesday, just about the culture at Notre Dame and reasons why they would stay. Yeah, I was surprised. Tim, as you mentioned, there could still be some movement on the back end
Yeah, yeah,
due to injuries or et cetera. But yeah, it's surprising. But again, I think it speaks very highly of Marcus Freeman and the atmosphere that he's created.
Yeah, and I think it does help too. I mean, we talked about the decision about potentially grandfathering in, to make it not have to go down to 105 right away. And I think that coming out towards the end of this process before Freeman was even communicating to the guys, like, you have till Thursday or Friday to make this decision. And then around that time, we found out she was like saying, I'm not going to agree to this unless you add this grandfather clause in. So I think that probably even made it a little quieter because I'm sure if had that not come down or they had just signed it, then some people would have had to go, but that kind of delayed it too.
and I misspoke. I looked at the questions, and there is a question about the portal, but there's also one about Notre Dame fighting Silverback Gorillas. So we will eventually get to that in segment two. Segment one, since we've had a little less news, I received a question I thought would be much better for discussion with you guys. That was going to be a mailbag answer because we're so high on Notre Dame's roster. And I think various levels, but all of us are higher on the roster than maybe we were January 25th for this, for February 1st. Like
No,
we
I would
watched some
agree.
spring and we all kind of elevated our expectations. Someone wants to know what's wrong with every position group. We have to pick something out. What can go wrong with every position group? And without nitpicking, because obviously things can go wrong all over the place. But I want to start with a hard one, especially since nobody left. Tim Priester, start with you. What's wrong with the running back room?
Running backs. Well, first of all, like injuries, of course,
Of
you
course, yeah,
factor
that's
in the
not part of it. Yeah,
the
yeah.
possibility of that. But what's wrong with the running back group? There aren't enough footballs to go around. That's probably the best way to put it. Maybe you have a running backs coach that isn't going to go as deep into that running back room as his predecessor, Dylan McCullough. Uh, you know, I mean, I you're going to have some good running backs that are disgruntled along the way because they
Sure.
want to play. I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with a lack of talent or a well-roundedness to the position. They're loaded. They're loaded at running back.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe kind of to what you said, TP is like maybe Sider doesn't want, McCullough broke it down by jobs, and this is the best person
Yeah.
at, pass blocking or whatever. And maybe you have some people in slightly less ideal situations than we had in the past because he's not just blanking like, oh, you're going in on this third and long because you can do this job the best. He may not think of it quite this way, so maybe there are some lapses that we see, but obviously like Jeremiah Love is also has more than enough capability to pass block too. So if it's not Aeneas Williams, like I think they'll be okay. So
And Jabron Payne was a pass blocker
yeah.
before he went down. It would be, yeah, you would have to have like I love Jadarian Price. I think when we're beginning of this or end of this week or on the weekend, we will unveil our five-person vote for Notre Dame's top 99 player countdown. I think I have Price pretty high. The only thing Price doesn't do well really would be pass block, but I can't imagine Sider would just be like, "Oh, I'll just leave him in there. It's third and 10." So I just because he doesn't announce his positions like Dylan did, I think he will still have some specialists. But yeah, I think you guys make a great point. It's behind the scenes that maybe there's more discourse in a room when people really don't have a niche role like they had under Dylan. I think there's probably more discussion here. Wide receiver. We could probably find something wrong with wide receiver if you just go in the recent past.
Yeah, Drew, let's alternate going first here.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think I'm really high in Malachi Fields. We still need to see what he does once he gets here, and he's going to have less time to kind of acclimate himself to the roster and with the quarterbacks and things like that. And then, I mean, there's a lot of reason to be high in Jaden Greathouse, but we were also high on him going into last season, and he really didn't do much until the last two games, and he did it against maybe the two best defenses they saw last year. So there's reason to be high, but there's also still those questions of why didn't he do this sooner? We also saw Jordan Faison break out in the Sun Bowl the year before, and then obviously injuries kind of slowed him. But we've seen these high moments for some of these younger guys that give us confidence, but also like there's also still questions. They need to prove it more consistently than what we've seen from them in the past.
Yeah, Drew, I referred to your the story you did a couple days ago about, looking ahead to next year's draft, and you quoted some draft people about potential first rounders, and Greathouse is in there. Man, that's based upon two games, because really prior to that it was pretty disappointing. Now, as you said, two massive games when it
Yeah.
counted the most, and so that's significant. But I think Greathouse would be hurt by a combine. I mean, I don't. He's not going to run as well as a lot of wideouts, and so he would be hurt by that. But look, the top four Fields, Pauling, Greathouse, and Faison, I think has a chance to be really good. I said that on Tuesday, but how much deeper can they go than that? And you need to go deeper than four over the course of a season, especially if the season extends into a long postseason. So you need Gilbert, you need KK Smith, you need Elijah Burris, guys like that to step forward to at least take some reps. They don't necessarily have to catch 17 passes a piece, and they won't, because those four
No.
guys, the front four guys, if they stay healthy, that's going to be a pretty heavy volume of catches by those four. So you need, I guess what I would say is you need some backups. Cam Williams, I don't expect Cam Williams to be ready to make that move ahead of the three backups that I just mentioned.
Yeah, I'm with you guys on the reserve situation. I think people might misinterpret what Tim and I were both in a thread when someone's like, do they really need six receivers? Look at Ohio State's top guys. You need six receivers to make sure your top four guys get through the season. That's the
Exactly.
point. You need, like, remember when Chauncey Stuckey said we got through an entire season in the Jets with three receivers? I was like, well, what was your record? Number one. Number two, this isn't the Jets, because Tobias Merriweather is one of your three, not whoever you had on the Jets. And in this case, I feel like Micah Gilbert lost a spring that was important to him.
Yeah, I agree.
That would be my takeaway. Of course, Elijah Burris gained a spring that was important to him, if you want to look at it that way. But I was hoping Micah Gilbert would be the clear number five, or even we'd be watching and say, oh, boy, which one of those guys is losing some snaps to Micah Gilbert? And through no real fault of his own, he lost a spring with the broken fingers. I think he needs that. And I want to go back to what Priesters said about Faison. Faison needs more seasoning as a wide receiver to be as good as he can possibly be. He's still a weapon, but he's not a guy that can just play part-time, I don't think, and become a great player. He can just be a good,
No,
helpful
and
player.
yeah, and he needs to get stronger, Tim. He needs to break
Yeah,
those ankle tackles that we saw
right.
way too many of. But that front four, man, that front four can do a lot of damage. How many receptions do you think that front four will have?
Oh, by far the lion's share. I was looking it up, and it's been a long time. It's been since 2015, and this is a similar season. We'll get to it in the tight ends part. It's been since 2015 where the number four receiver had 28 catches. Okay, this is a Will Fuller team. The number five receiver was Corey Robinson. He had 16, and he was supposed to have a lot more. If you remember Corey Robinson going into his junior year, gosh, half of those were probably against. Oh no, Florida State was his 2014 season. So Corey Robinson was their fifth guy then. It's been since then since they've come close to having five guys catching passes. I wonder if Burris can do it, but I'm with you, Tim. Those four guys, when healthy, it's a good quality quartet.
And then Raritan mixes into the
Yeah, and that leads us
the
to tight
leading
end, and you,
receivers.
you could pick up at tight end. What would be your concern at tight end?
Well,
Injuries is fair here, in my opinion, because of the history of it.
yeah, yeah, because Flanagan's, Cooper Flanagan's not going to be ready. Ty Washington needs to be a great blocker, which he showed at Arkansas, or at least very good blocker. Somebody has to, but you still need, Bauman, even a fully healthy Bauman is still not going to be a huge pass receiving threat. He
I feel like
needs
he
to,
had to have lost some speed with a broken leg and
there's
two
no
torn
doubt. I mean,
ACLs.
there's
Like,
there's just there's no doubt. So like I'm less high on Jack Larson, because I've seen the public has seen the blue gold game, and he played really well. He made a couple really good plays there. But when you add it all up to what we've seen, I just don't know that he's ready. Maybe he will be ready to emerge, but maybe somebody like James Flanagan needs to emerge as a freshman. They've had that happen before. They're just not really, deep enough there. I think Justin Fisher can play play a role, not catching the football, but play a role as a lead blocker too.
Yeah, I think there's definitely reasons that we've discussed on this podcast to be optimistic, based on what we saw from Eli Raridon this spring, even yeah, I mean Jack Larson in the blue goal game, but like it has to kind of hit on all the optimism for it to be like a solid tight end room that can even withstand like an injury. So I think that would be the biggest knock is like there's not a lot of room for this to go wrong and still be okay, or before this goes wrong, I should say. So this they need a lot of guys to show. Eli Raridon needs to keep improving and show that he can do what we saw in this spring in the game. And we've seen him look great. Maybe not as good as he did this spring, but we've seen him look great before. But we haven't seen that translate to the season and consistently too. So
Yeah, I think you guys hit on it. There's a question mark everywhere. Can Raridan be as good as a Notre Dame starting tight end that has to carry the load? Can he be that good? Because he hasn't been that good yet. He's improved. Can anybody be the blocker that they really need to run the two tight end offense? Which even if it's the first time in a long time that you're not, it's still 30% of the time with Jeremiah Love in this running game. You're going to want your second tight end in there. So Ty Washington or Justin Fisher or Kevin Bauman has to be adept at that role. I think tight end is just everything has to fall exactly how we said it, where there's so much wiggle room at running back and offensive line that we're going to get to. Like tight end has to fall into place, and that's the same thing now. Really, Drew, we'll go back to you with quarterback. I know we buried the lead here, but I mean, we can all find something that could go wrong in the quarterback room at this point, right?
yeah, definitely. I mean, Marcus Freeman has spent all spring saying like we need one of these guys to like arise to the top and name themselves the quarterback essentially like they got to prove it. And what if neither of them really separate themselves enough to like be like this is the guy and then they have to go into the start of season at Miami and then home against Texas A&M while they're still trying to figure it out or they're not as confident. And I think, at the end of the day, for as high as we are in their potentials and we think the decision to, lean to those two over a Steve Angeli was the right decision. Like they also have to face their toughest challenges right out of the gate. And what if they're not ready for that moment? Like Notre Dame can simulate pressure all they want and they can feel competition in fall camp, but like that's still not going to prepare you for an environment you guys saw in 2017 at Miami. So that I think that's the biggest concern and hole I would poke in. And then beside, they still have other things to prove too. But
You have to allow for a learning curve, whichever the two quarterbacks start. And I'm just as we go through the summer, I'm assuming it's that look, will it be will Kenny Minchey have an opportunity, a full opportunity to win the job in preseason? Yes, I believe that. I also believe that CJ Carr is going to win that competition. So, the ceiling for CJ Carr is very high. If he's great in 2025, then you have a Heisman Trophy candidate moving forward. But I find it really hard to believe that he's going to be great, especially as you say, Drew, starting out with those two teams, Miami on the road and Texas A&M. There has to be a learning curve. I don't care how good you are there. There's going to be a learning curve for Arch Manning as a first-time starter this year, and everybody's pretty very high on him, obviously. So just seeing experience at the position, and you want to talk about a position where you cannot afford an injury. You can't afford an injury at quarterback.
Mine is what struck Riley Leonard last year, and he admitted not in a good way. Riley Leonard, I think I said before the season, looked like he was poised to be one of the best leaders this program has had at the position since Tony Rice. Remember, Jack Freeman made a face when that happened, but Jack, I think it might have come true. Riley Leonard admitted when he lost to Northern Illinois that he wasn't a leader the next week, that he was sullen, that he had his hood over his head in the locker room, and someone had to snap him out of it and say, dude, you're supposed to be leading us. That's Riley Leonard.
yeah, he asked
So
for
what happens if they lose one of the first two games this year and CJ Carr has to lead or Kenny Minchey has to lead? That's
Yeah,
leadership
no,
comes out when you lose, not when you're 10-0. I mean,
you're absolutely right, Tim. And again, do I feel like CJ Carr is going to be a leader of this team more in 2026 and 2025? But I think what little we know about him, our little interactions with him, watching him on the field, body language, mannerisms, I think he can be that guy. But again, right out of the gate, it's difficult to expect him. He can't, he can't be the leader that Riley Leonard ultimately became last year because of all of the experience that Riley Leonard gained along the way.
I don't know whose turn it is, but one of you guys should go ahead and tell me what's all these things wrong with the Notre Dame offensive
Yeah,
line going into the season.
I think it's my turn.
I'm
Well, let's
going
see.
to say it must be Drew's turn to just go away.
They only have 1 year of starting experience. It was a long year though, because it was
Yes, it
like
was.
it was a year and a half plus. Maybe, maybe even more though when you consider the competition down the stretch. But no, it's a great group. Number six, we know who the projected starters are. Number six is Sullivan Absher. Number seven is if Gerby Lambert is healthy enough to move forward. After that, now you're kind of guessing as to who the next guy in line is, right?
Yeah. So if we have a repeat of 2024 and 2025, you could have an issue. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess if we're being really nitpicky, like, is everyone playing the best position for like this offensive line? Like, would it have been better for Anthony Knapp to be healthy this spring and get time working inside? So Jagasaw, maybe he is a better, guard at the next level, but maybe he is the best tackle on this team outside of Emil Wagner, something like that. So like, I feel like even though this wasn't like said explicitly, but like Knapp not being available this spring, it's hard to be like, we're going to take a guy who started 15 games at left tackle and start working him in the fall. It kind of, I feel like de facto made it so he has to stick outside, and Jagas obviously showed a lot of promise. So I feel like that would be my biggest concern, is that you just don't have the best pieces in the right spot for this line. But again, that's being pretty nitpicky.
Yeah, they're first world problems for the offensive line that were a little different than the problems the offensive line had last May and last August that we were talking about all summer long. So I think Notre Dame can handle this. Switching to the defense, we'll start off with, I think, the biggest concern. Let's use the defensive line as a whole, Priester. Biggest concern going into the spring was the defensive line. I guess it still is, but less of a concern than it was.
Yeah, the good news as it relates to defensive end position is that Traore and Botello have been cleared for full participation beginning with this summer. So that's huge news. And then Bryce Young's going to be great. I think we all know that. Junior Tuihalamaka is a steady in the boat leader in his own way, fundamentally sound, knows how to play team defense. Those are all good things. Defensive end, I think, is going to be really, really good. I still have questions about defensive tackle, and I stand by the notion that Jared Dawson and Gabe Rubio have to be really good. You need six, at least five, I guess,
Mhm.
or maybe at least four. I guess I should say. But I think it starts with those projected two starters, and then you sure could use Jason Onye to play to the level that he played in the Jersey scrimmage, not in the blue gold game. So I just still think that there are questions at defensive tackle, and they're going to have to tackle those questions, so to speak, at defensive tackle by using six. But Dawson needs to fulfill. Notre Dame's done a great job with transfer portal guys. He needs to be as good as we think he can be. And I was extremely high on Gabe Rubio last year when he came back from the injury. I thought he looked really big and athletic and quick and strong. He needs to reach his full potential.
Yeah, I think even with defensive end a little bit, I mean, I agree. I'm high on all those guys. There still haven't been. There's no like Isaiah Foskey coming back for a senior year, or even, Julian Okwara didn't work out as well for a senior year. But you had a guy who you're like, oh, I know this guy can get me 7, 8, 9 sacks. And there's, I think we saw Traore looked like he was poised to do something like that last year, but then he got hurt. Now he's coming back from it. So I think there's just, even if we're going to look at that position, there's a lot of guys like Bryce Young. If he had 10 sacks this year, I'm not going to be surprised. Like, he has that type of potential, but like, we just haven't seen somebody do that yet. And they don't necessarily need somebody even go that high, because there is so much depth there and so many
Right.
guys with experience too. But this just a guy that like other teams are like, oh man, like this guy is a game wrecker. Like, we just haven't seen somebody do that consistently.
I'm with you guys. I love the depth that they now have. And I think, Priester, you're right about five, not four, because last year, the five guys, Heinisch, Onye, Mills-Cross, and Rubio, never played together healthy. None of them were ever together healthy on the same field. So you do need five. That was probably excessive injuries they encountered last year, but maybe it's the reality of 16 games. Um, I guess my takeaway would be if we think the defensive ends are an A because there's some frontline guys, the defensive tackles can't be an A because there's no frontline guys proven yet. They're all five guys I think are rotational players, very or good rotational defensive line players inside. Where if you just had one dude, one guy that you're like, this guy's going in the top 20 in next year's draft, plus
Mm.
those rotation guys, then you'd be onto something because
Yeah,
they
that's
can
not going to
handle the
happen.
Nope, no, they don't have that. So I think that's the fair critique. Linebacker, no group. I know group came further from game one. Game one and two. It was game two where the linebacker struggled last year. Actually, we did not see that coming. We thought it'd be game one. Their assignment correct mostly in game one, game two, and then I really liked the linebacking core last year, and they can be just as good this year.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. There's a lot to like. I mean, you're still losing a guy like Jack Kaiser, who'd been in the program for 6 years. Like he, wore the green dot most consistently. Like he was keeping everything going. Like you still need to. I feel like it's just like some of these guys are unproven. There's a lot of reasons to think they can do it though, but like that's a lot to replace. And that's after going from the year before you had two other fifth year guys. Like this is kind of the youngest, least experienced linebacker room we've seen at Notre Dame in a few years. We got to see them kind of adapt to that and see those people step up rather than be like, well, we know they have a JD Bertrand, we know they have a Jack Kaiser. Like we still need to see Drake Bowen do
or
that.
or Drew White. Yeah, I think way too, you can feel it already. Way too many people are going to underestimate the loss of Jack Kaiser. And I get it because of the we know there are some good linebackers here. But I also I mean in addition to Drake Bowen who's on the rise. Have you seen the billboards of him in town? Maybe
No,
it's only on the
No.
south side of town. I'm trying to think of the name of the company.
there's only KVA billboards out in Granger Priester. We just like to go with them.
Yeah, Drake Bowen's on the
I put it
south
up
side of
myself.
town.
It's right outside the St. Pius area.
Okay. Drake Bowen's on the rise. And Tim, I know how you feel about Kingston Villiamawasa. I think he's going to be great right now.
hmm
I
I
mean,
agree.
he was really, really good last year. I think he's going to be great right now. And you pair him up with Bowen, and that's outstanding. Osbury just makes plays. You keep looking at the stats as you go through the year, and Jaden Osbury's like fifth or sixth on the team in tackles. How does that happen? You don't even realize he's doing it. And then Jalen Sneed is the guy that, just if he gets to the combine next year, he'll probably be the most impressive of any of the Notre Dame linebackers when they go to the combine, just because of what he can do in the testing. But I think KVA and Bowen lead it. I think that top four is really, really good. Does Zinter have an opportunity to get on the field? It's going to be really difficult, but certainly a linebacker core to be really, really excited about.
Yeah, I'll only channel Golden echoing you guys. Al Golden said Jack Kaiser's a problem solver on the grass. He's a problem solver on the sideline. You need those guys. I've been saying it about Xavier Watts. That's Jack Kaiser. I think Drake Bowen can become a problem solver too. But you need them. I mean, I've never heard Jalen Sneed being a problem solver. And I think Jalen Sneed better just be good this year as opposed to us making excuses why he's better than people think he is. Like, pretty sure you and I went from Jalen Sneed's not beating anybody out, dude. 2 years ago to last year, like, hey, you guys aren't giving Jalen Sneed enough credit. I would just like to see Jalen Sneed play good football and not have to like point out why he's good on third down and talk about his future all the time. He could just show up and play good football.
Yeah.
Another position, hard not to like cornerback when you're breaking down Notre Dame's cornerbacks. Throw away the past. Notre Dame's cornerbacks are just good this year. Let's nitpick and find something wrong.
I don't, I Carson Hobbs has to prove himself with all the bluster from us about how
Yeah.
much we liked him in the
Well,
spring.
he
But
he, he had some bluster himself,
yeah,
actually.
no, there's no doubt. There's no doubt about it, and you love it. But the starting duo of Leonard Moore and Christian Gray is really outstanding. And you look at the young guys, Cree Thomas. We haven't seen Dallas Golden and Mark Zachary the fourth on the football field yet at Notre Dame, but you kind of believe that if Mike Mickens recruited them and he starts coaching them, come this summer or I
Yeah.
guess come August, that they're going to end up being pretty good. Would you like another body there? I don't. Do we put Devontae Smith with safeties or cornerbacks? He's a nickel. I think he's got a chance to be really good.
I mean, we're higher on the nickel at this time than we were last year and the year before. That's the best way of looking at
That is the best way of looking at it.
Yeah, I think even just looking back at like 2023, like you had Ben Morrison and Cam Hart who kind of both took it away. And I think my critique would be like, we need to see Christian Gray get to be the point where like you're also like, they don't have somebody where like the best teams feel like they can still pick on somebody. And I think there are still times where he got in his own head or whatever it may be that as for as talented as he is, and he made some great plays like against Penn State to kind of, set up the victory and stuff. Like there's still moments where like Notre Dame had a corner like the good teams could go after, and he needs to kind of prove that he can be a guy. If you're going to go after me, I'm going to make you pay. And I think if that happens, then you're looking at a duo that could potentially be better than what they had in 2023.
I want to remove Jeremiah Smith from this, but I agree with you because we were at the USC game, and I know he started great and ended spectacularly, but we were at the USC game just looking at each other like, what the hell is going on with Christian Gray? We had never seen that before, and then you realized, oh, it's been a year since Christian Gray has seen quarterbacks and wide receivers that can throw the
Yeah,
football
that
because
was
they
it.
didn't have that great passing attacks last year.
Yeah, I caught a lot of heat from Sampson about my praise about the USC receivers. I didn't hear him saying a whole hell of a
No,
lot
they
after
had
the
it. They
game
had
about that.
themselves. They had a day. They did have a
I
day
got you,
out there.
Sampson.
Yeah. Wrap it up with safety, and I've already spoken my piece on this one. They don't have Xavier Watts. That's the problem with the safeties. Problem solver.
I think I also want to see more from Adon Schuler. Like, I think his coverage was actually elite. Like, I was going back and looking at his numbers, but he also, of any player who played at least like
Oh,
65 snaps, he had the most missed tackles. He was like over 20% missed tackle rate. Like, that's pretty significant. And you're not going to have that safety blanket that, like you just said, T.O., like, is Xavier Watts, where if you make a mistake, is there somebody who's like anticipating that and kind of covering up for that? So I think we need to see more. And then also you look at both Schuler and Watts played over like 750 snaps last year. Obviously, that was, 16 game season. But I think even Jalen Stroman's never played more than like 384. So somebody's going to have to play a lot more snaps, even if you're dividing up those with like a guy like Luke Talich or Tay Johnson or something like that. There isn't somebody who's proven that they can kind of be on the field that often yet, too.
Yeah, Don Schuler's he's a volume snap guy, so he doesn't have to come off the field a whole lot. You need Jalen Stroman to be healthy all year, and I realize that I always cringe at as somebody that likes to consider himself a former athlete. The phrase injury prone. I mean, injuries happen on a football field. That doesn't necessarily mean that he is. I don't like the word like prone. Like when he walks on the field, he's more likely to be injured than somebody else. You take a
that
couple
was Alvin
shots.
Miller. Alvin Miller was injury prone too.
Okay. Well, okay. I'm not saying that there aren't players
I
like
know.
that,
I'm kidding.
but
That's a loose
yeah,
emoji. Remember, he said if he looks at AstroTurf, he's going to tear an
yeah,
ACL.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And Strowman suffered a couple tough ones, and frankly, the one that he's dealing with now was an old injury that just didn't heal properly, and so I don't know, maybe there's some proneness there in his ability to heal. I don't know, but you need him healthy, and you need Luke Telich. You'd like to think that what we all saw in the Blue Gold game is legitimate Luke Telich, and I don't think there's any reason to really doubt that. He's in his third year in the program. He's got great length. They knew what they were getting when he came here. He bet on himself coming in without a scholarship. So I think that's a good group. Can there be a fourth in there if you need one? Is it Tay Johnson? I doubt whether it's Ben Minnick. I think Ben Minnick is probably more of a nickel. And frankly, now that you have Devontae Smith and Carson Hobbs, I'm not sure what kind of possibility he would have at nickel. So the top three look to be really good. Tay Johnson seemed to make a move, showed some physicality in the. I mean, especially I thought in the Jersey scrimmage game. But you keep Strowman healthy and maybe one more that you're sure that you can count on at safety.
I'm glad you brought that up, Drew. The Schuler part. That was the one thing I was going to piggyback. I remember it was the A&M game. He fired and missed a tackle in the backfield that would have been a tackle for loss. And Pete, I was next to Pete, and he's like, I still love that from a guy in his first start. I do
Absolutely.
too. I don't love it from a guy in his 17th start though when they're playing Miami.
No, I
Make the
agree,
point
and
on that one. Yeah.
I think that's a great point because a lot of times when a guy shoots through and doesn't make the tackle, he's setting somebody else up for a
Yes. Yeah.
tackle because you made the ball carrier alter his approach to how he was going to complete that run. So Drew, that's a good stat. When I think about a Don Schuler, yeah, do I think I remember some plays where he should have made that tackle, but his aggressiveness, I think, compensates by allowing he's one of 11,
Yeah.
and that allows the other 10 to make a move.
Oh, we love the guy, but 10 of his 18 missed tackles, I just looked, Drew. And, Pro Football Focus rates mixed tackles oddly. But 10 of his 18 were against A&M, USC, and Penn State. There's some running backs that were pretty good football players on
True.
athletes.
And I think my thing, not that, all of a sudden he's going to be like missing fewer than 10%, but what if he drops that down to like 15% and there's a few more plays he made, just like
Yep.
another level to go to help replace the loss of a guy like Xavier Watts is more my thinking, like going from 20%, which kind of stands out, like it's 1 out of 5, to just dropping that down to where he's making a few more plays throughout the season that, those tackles for a loss or whatever can ruin a whole drive.
Looking to upgrade your wardrobe? Founded by Notre Dame alum Go Wang, you've seen ESQ's custom clothing on the player walk and all of your favorite players and coaches. With more than a decade of making the best bespoke clothing available, ESQ will help you look and feel your best. From a perfect fitting suit or sport coat, shirt or bomber jacket, or that perfect tuxedo for wedding season, check out esqclothing.com and book an appointment to upgrade your wardrobe today. Mention Irish Illustrated and get 10% off your entire purchase. That's esqclothing.com. We'll be back with segment two, burning up the boards.
Segment two, we call it Burning Up the Boards. We start with a question from Donnelly3434. At this point of their careers, where do you see the ceiling for these players in 2025? I don't know if we want to rank these or talk about them, I guess, talk about them individually. So we'll start with Jordan Faison.
Go ahead, Drew.
I mean, I think his ceiling's quite high. I mean, we did see him get even more time than last spring, kind of with the football team, and I think it's worth like noting that like he had no receiver experience coming into Notre Dame, so even him developing a little more like could be significant. And then, I think the biggest thing is can he stay healthy and kind of eliminate some of those drops because there were a lot of times even after he got back where Leonard was looking to him down the field and he just wouldn't always come up with the play. So I think he could be a guy who's in consideration for like 40 catches this year or something like that, and being a really dynamic kind of down the field threat too. So I think that's his ceiling, like being 40, 45 catches, like one of those guys we think could do it for Notre Dame this year.
I'm hoping for a Jordan Faison's also getting 9 carries in 12 regular season games and making some plays with jet sweeps or stuff along those lines too. Somewhere where he's just a real threat because then you can fake the jet sweep to Jordan Faison and hit other stuff. I feel like people always talk about play action. There's different ways of doing it nowadays. That would be play action too. If you think Jordan Faison's
Yeah.
going to get the ball on a field side sweep and he doesn't, you hit the backside boundary. That's play action too. So I like him to be. I think he'd become a threat. That would be my upside.
I think that's a good point, Tim. But I want to ask you guys a question. Of the group of Malachi Fields, Will Pauling, Jaden Greathouse, and Jordan Faison, where is Faison going to be in terms of receptions?
I am going to, just because I don't have to tell you who he'll be ahead of, I'm going to say third instead of fourth. Does that make
Okay.
sense? Because
Yeah.
I just get now, let's say they're all healthy. I'll still say third instead of fourth.
Yeah, I think third too, just because I think he's a little more proven outside, whereas I could see Pauling and or Greathouse kind of one of them taking more away from the other. But I definitely see what you're saying. I just, yeah, I guess I'm thinking he's maybe the fourth most proven at this point, but I think his ceiling might be higher than a Pauling or
Well, that's a
something
good
like that.
point because the question is about ceiling. I mean, I would say he would be third in the number of receptions, but it could be fourth just because, I mean, Pauling is a proven volume receiver, 8 yard receptions, moving the chains, that kind of stuff. But he just Faison needs to get a lot stronger. You need that lower body strength to break some tackles. Then you're going to see the best of Jordan Faison.
Next one up is
Yeah,
Ashton Craig, and
yeah.
I'm just going to quickly say he could be the best center since Patterson was healthy for Notre Dame.
Yeah, I think something I want to see from him too is like, I mean, we assume he'll take over the center job, but like, it'd be nice if he comes back healthy in the summer and then he kind of just supplants like, I'm Sullivan Absher, you're not competing here anymore, and they can kind of move on with him, like getting those reps, like reestablishing himself as that job as they get ready for him to go into Miami in a month too. So kind of looking at his ceiling, like how quickly can he get back to where like this is his job and we can get him ready for the maybe the toughest environment we'll see all year.
Yeah, again, I think he'll be, whenever you're talking about ACLs and Achilles, I think he'll be better in 2026 and 2025. But
Sure.
let me just put it this way. Okay, there's 6 guys on this list. I've only read two. Faison Craig, Jordan Botello, Jason Onye, Drake Bowen, and Christian Gray. Who has the highest ceiling? I would say Ashton Craig long term.
long term, but not this year, I don't think, because of the that you
It
pointed
is,
out.
it does
Yep,
ask in
yep,
2025, and I
yep.
would agree. I agree with that.
So Botello is, I'd like to see him get back to. I don't know if he can get back to where he was. Like he was the best defensive player on the team for 2.5 games last year. It was 2.5 games, but he was the number one defensive player. He was the number one ranked by everybody and by Marcus Freeman. So that's about as good as it gets. And he was making plays at the Purdue game before he got hurt.
Yeah.
Can he get to that by November? That would be a ceiling for me for Botello.
Yeah, I think mine might be Christian Gray. Like I kind of mentioned, I kind of, critiqued him earlier, but like I think part of it is too, like I know he has the potential to become more of a lockdown guy and somebody who doesn't have those lapses of confidence. Like you'd really hope to see like him struggling so much against USC last year, like that. He's had the kind of low worst case scenario. He gave up the play that kind of finalized like what happened in the national championship game. Like how does he build off that? Like he's had those disappointments now, like put that behind you and know you can be better. So I think he's a guy who could be, we're talking about like a Cam Hart level kind of guy.
Yeah, I just don't know. We talk about like confidence lapses. That's the next challenge for him.
Mhm.
And look, when you give up the deciding play in a national championship game, you're going to be upset about it, and I understand that. But I think that's the hurdle for him. How high is the ceiling for Jason Onye?
Mine is a quality third defensive tackle on a playoff winning team. I don't think I don't think Jason Onye is like supplanting a
Is he gonna?
healthy other guys. I think he's third is
Will he be
his.
more? I know not exactly. Well, I'm not
We
sure
can't use
exactly how
last year
they
because of all
align.
the injuries. Yeah. What?
No, I
What?
understand, but is his ceiling higher than Donovan Heinisch?
I would say
Yeah. Yeah. Ceiling is,
ceiling
I think,
is.
because of the strength. I
Just of
think.
his, yeah, and
Yep.
it's just of his natural. But will his productivity be
No.
higher than Donovan
I don't
Heinisch?
think so. I
Yeah,
don't think it will. I think
yeah.
Heinisch makes plays when he's in there, but it's good to have bigger bodies when you play Ohio State, Georgia, and Penn State.
How about Drake Bowen?
I think he has the highest 2025 ceiling of the players we have listed right here.
Okay,
2025, but not
that's fair. Yeah, because of Craig. Would you put Craig first long
long
term? I
term.
think
Yeah,
you
because
said
they think
yeah,
he's a pro immediately. So that's I
yeah,
guess I go back to I guess I go back to what the coaches
yeah.
said.
Drew, what do you think about Bowen?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of reason
That's
to
an
be.
NFL player, right? I
Yeah,
mean, there's
yeah.
no,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think maybe see if he can make some more like kind of destructive negative plays this year. I don't know that that necessarily, will always be his role and he obviously has to take step up leadership. But I mean, yeah, there's a lot of reasons to be his ceiling's also incredible. I mean, he won the high school Buckus Award, so I'm
yeah. Well,
Yeah,
the
that's true. I always forget he
yeah,
won it too. So did Prince Kollie, and his ceiling's not as high as Drake Bowen.
yeah,
So
the
yeah,
negative yardage plays come with an increase in diagnostic
yep.
skills, and now having a full year, a ton of snaps under his belt should be even better in that category. And you need that because nobody was better diagnostically than Jack Kaiser.
I'm going to ask this second question differently than it's. I'm going to include point number one, but this is pretty obvious. Irish from A2. Which of these three results at the end of 2025 would be a better indicator to you that Indy has made another serious run in the playoffs? I'm going to read his number one, but we're all going to agree this is the one because it has so many other things going along with it. CJ Carr is the Heisman runner up. Let's move that one out of this. Or Indy has two All Americans on the D line, or Indy wins the Joe Moore Award. So let's just take two and three because if CJ Carr is the Heisman runner up, that so many things go into that. Notre Dame is making a playoff run.
Yeah, well, for me, it's the defensive line because we're not expecting that. Whereas Joe Moore, the offensive line, being a Joe Moore Award winner, I've already said they should be a finalist. So if you're a finalist, you're pretty much reaching your full potential. D line, that kind of level of productivity, that's an easy choice for me.
Yeah, I agree with you. If they have two defensive linemen that are making those type of plays, and that I mean that's what you see some out of some of these best like SEC teams too, is like they have
Yes.
those type of caliber defensive linemen and just like kind of, destroying plays before they even start. So if they could have that, and I mean, agreed. CJ Carr, if he were a Heisman runner up, I realized Brady Quinn wasn't even the Heisman runner up. He was third
He
and
wasn't even
fourth.
invited, the poor guy. He should have been. They only invited three that year.
Yeah. Well, he
Yeah.
was, I
Oh
think he was
man, he was
invited his
worthy.
last year.
He was definitely worthy of
Oh
going.
my
Yeah,
gosh, yeah.
they invited three. They invited
Well,
Leinart,
even
Vince Young,
and
and
He,
Bush.
and
he,
I realize it's
oh,
just supposed to be for 1 year, but when you put the 2 years together, you should have been there.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
yeah. So if CJ Carr, exceeds Brady Quinn level of success this year, that would be pretty excellent.
You guys know the last time Notre Dame won the Joe Moore Award, they lost 3 games, right? Including by 3,800 to
Yeah,
Miami. Yeah.
yeah.
And then they didn't run the ball well against LSU. They won the game and they lost to Stanford. So I'm going with defense. And also the last time Notre Dame had two defensive linemen named first team All American, I'm guessing early 70s, Priester, maybe 66.
Ross
Walt
Browner,
Patulski didn't play with Ross Browner. So no, Ross Browner.
no.
I don't know if it ever
I don't
happened.
think Willie Fry got
No,
those kind of
I'm looking
accolades.
and I don't think Steve Niehaus and Ross Browner were very close there in
You
75,
know,
76. So there you go.
okay. And Steve
Yep.
Niehaus, that's a guy, you got to be an old timer to remember Steve Niehaus, but that was a guy that Joe Yanto coached him, defensive line coach, and he loved Steve Niehaus and said he would have been talked about as one of the great defensive linemen in Notre Dame history, but he had knee problems, and the medical staff's ability to fix knee problems
Yeah.
53 years ago or whatever it was is not like it is today. And so he had multiple knee issues and couldn't fully reach his potential, but he was great.
I think this technically, if we count second team, happened last year. The FWAA still named Howard Cross a second team All-American.
Well,
I
great.
think Mills technically had some nods too. I know that's not what we're talking about, but it kind of happened last year. I don't think Cross played. I think that was more based off of like his reputation from the year
Yeah.
before that
Yes.
he got
Yeah.
that.
I mean,
So
I don't even. I mean, Zorich was even alone when that happened. That was they. I mean, they had Zorich and Stams didn't make it together. That's why. But yeah, the point remains: when you have two All Americans up front, you're wreaking some havoc. The pub downtown wonders. You mentioned Minchie would have to show something by the summer, which is before training camp, to really have a chance of overtaking Carr. He says this seems highly unlikely. What exactly could he show in a summer session that would separate him favorably? In other words, what would it take specifically for him to take QB1 or challenge for it?
Go ahead, Drew.
I touched on this on Tuesday, but I think when you even watch a practice with CJ Carr, like when the offensive linemen are coming off the field or whatever, even if he's not involved in a rep, like he kind of commands them pretty well. Like he's always like the first guy to go like, dap people up and stuff like that. Like, and I think Freeman's always talking about this. Like he's a very natural leader. And without Angeli in that room and over the summer, like it's going to be the quarterbacks organize a lot of these throwing sessions and stuff, but the coaches kind of watch or observe. And like I think they really need to see like can Minchie kind of fill that gap. Now there's not three guys doing it, it's just two, and that's something that Carr clearly needs to or Carr has clearly demonstrated, but I don't think I've seen that personally from Minchie. So how does he start stepping up in those ways? And I think you want a guy who can lead. And I think even in the blue gold game, like Carr had a bad, one of his series, like they kind of start off poorly and he kind of just like clapped his guys into focus and was like, hey, like we're okay. And you got to see Minchie start doing stuff like that to know he can handle the start of the season.
Yeah, I think there's a few things. I mean, accuracy, um, command of the offense, and I realize this isn't full scale 11 on 11, so you don't get a full picture of it, but accuracy, command of the offense, camaraderie with the frontline receivers. I don't know how much they can do with protections, but ultimately it's going to come down to protections. I'm not sure exactly how much they can accomplish or Minchie could accomplish during the summer as it relates to protections, but there are things that can be done. And there's some observation. Um, I mean, I think that's mainly by the strength and conditioning staff. Is that
Yeah,
correct? Or
but my point was when we talked about this is the whole you hear a lot from the strength and conditioning staff about what happens in the summer. The coaches do, I mean. And also, I don't think people understand necessarily that training camp is not a 30-day training camp. I mean, they have to choose
it's
their quarterback by
it's
August 11th. They have to,
it's
yeah,
10-ish.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's 10 days. You're going to pick your quarterback and start preparing for the season and then preparing for Miami. You don't have 30 days. If you did, I never would have said that about the summer. You don't have 30 days.
No more 3-a-days. There, there was a time, well, 2-a-days were very common when
Two
I
days
was
were
starting.
15 years ago, 16 years ago.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and there were I think there were some 3-a-days when I started my career.
Oh my gosh.
It was insane. Now, obviously not every one of those are full scale practices, but yeah, you don't have as much time as you used to in August.
From future Domer Dad, we'll go to Drew first. Notre Dame has a chance to earn the moniker DBU. Did you ever think that was a possibility?
Yeah, so when I, kind of looked at this question and thought about it, like I think it's worth noting that Notre Dame had a really good reputation with defensive backs when they were the last time we would all say like they were a truly elite program in the early 90s. Like 91, you had Todd Light as a top 5 pick. Then you still had Rod Smith the year after in the second round, and then Tom Carter, first rounder. Um, the year after that, you had um,
Bobby Taylor was a Thorpe
Jeff
Award. Yeah.
Jeff
yeah,
Burris,
Jeff Burris
yeah,
was 94, and then Bobby Taylor until Morrison was the last time they had a second rounder um, in 95. So they had a, 30-year gap in that type of stuff. So I think that's a position that they've actually showed they could do in the past, and I think it's an even more important position today than it was back then. So I think
Yes.
not only is it something that like I could see happening, but also, I mean, you guys can speak more to that era, but like that's what it takes to be elite at college football.
yeah. I don't know how old future Domer Dad is. I mean, maybe he's not old enough to remember those glory days
He
in
would
the
be current
90s.
Domer. He would be current Domer Dad if he was older. So there you go. Now he's
Yeah.
future Domer Dad.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Next question from Irish Gambler. With the portal closing, are you at all surprised that those transferring from Notre Dame haven't made bigger splashes at their new school, such as Holden Stays, Chris Tyree, Drew Pine, Rico Flores, Logan Diggs? We'll stop there and get to the next group here in a second.
No. I thought Diggs going to LSU, maybe if LSU was great, would be a great RB 1B as opposed to just a guy who's playing good football. But usually when Notre Dame guys transfer out, we know why they're transferring out. And I mean, Rico Flores is a huge surprise, but I didn't think Rico Flores was going to go win the Blitnikoff Award just because he wanted to.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think in some of these guys, like I think, Diggs has had more injury trouble since
Yeah.
he's left than he had at Notre Dame. So I think I wouldn't say that's a surprise, but I think that's contributed to his maybe lack of success. But I think he's the best one of this group. Um, and so, but I don't. I mean, yeah, I agree with Flores. Like I think he was also injured a little bit last year too, and so I think that kind of hampers them. But yeah, I agree. A lot of these guys leave because of reasons that like would lead them to leave. Like, did I think Chris Tyree would regress to the point where he fumbles a kickoff against Notre Dame when he comes back?
Well,
No, but I didn't. I think Notre Dame relied on him a lot in a way that kind of propped him up during his last year here as a
Yeah.
receiver.
Look, Chris Tyree wasn't a great college football player. I think we all had a ton of respect for who Chris Tyree
yeah.
was. I mean, from the moment we met him, tremendous respect, but he wasn't a great college football player. Drew Pine, no, we didn't expect great things. Holden Stays chooses to go to the best conference in the country. So him not
Holden Stays what regressed in my eyes his year at Notre Dame when I saw that Clemson game and his reaction to it. I loved Holden Stays in camp. Like I watching Holden Stays before he played, I was like, that dude's gonna be a
yeah,
baller. Then when he had a chance to be a baller, he kind of hurt himself a little bit in that
yeah.
game.
Logan Diggs had 165 carries in his last year at Notre Dame, and he had 119 the next year at LSU. I don't know that he's necessarily made the best choices as to
I don't think he thinks he's made the best choices either.
yeah, I mean, as to A, transfer out of Notre Dame, and B, the places where he chose to transfer. He was banged up, Drew, at Mississippi. But he's had 120 carries since he left Notre Dame when he had 165 in his last year. Then the next group of people mentioned, where are we here? By Irish Gambler, Shane Simon, Jacob Lacey, Phil Dracovic, Jordan Johnson, Tobias Merriweather. There's not a great football player in there. Jacob Lacey's probably the best.
Yeah, Lacey leaving was a depth blow at the time. I thought it didn't kill him,
Yeah.
but yeah,
That
Yeah,
was right before we went to, I can remember sitting in my hotel in Vegas writing about Jacob Lacey leaving Notre Dame, which was kind of a surprise at the time, but he wanted to play more, and he was a little undersized.
Next question comes from JBox842. CFP champions have typically had 4 to 8 first round picks in the year they won in the following year, which assumes meaningful contributors. Which 4 to 8 players on the Notre Dame roster need to be a first round pick in the next 2 years for them to win a championship?
Go ahead, Drew.
Uh, I would say Bryce Young needs to, because this we're looking at the next two drafts, correct?
Yep, next two
Yeah,
drafts.
so Bryce Young like becoming that type of edge rusher. First say win a championship. Um, I mean, I want to say if CJ Carr becomes a first round pick, like
Yeah,
that's pretty, in two
pretty good
in two
indication.
years. Yeah. After his junior year, that would be a really strong sign that they're going to be competing for that. Um, I mean, I think Leonard Moore will be a first round pick in 2 years potentially. He has that type of ceiling. So I feel like to not say him would mean he like goes below what I expect for him. Um, so I don't want to say that, or so I want to say him still. And then 2 years, I'm going to say Emil Wagner.
I have
That's a good
eight.
one.
I tried to find eight, so I found eight. In 2 years, these eight could be first round picks. And I'm also taking into account that running backs don't often go in the first round, and neither do safeties. So Adon Schuler is not one of my eight, but you could throw him on there. Love, Moore, Jagusa, Viliamu Emil Wagner, Bryce Young, Boubacar Traore in 2 years, and I mean the other guy would be CJ Carr.
Yeah, a healthy Ashton Craig, a great year from Ashton
A
Craig in
first round pick at
2026.
center though, like
Well,
that's
no, no,
yeah,
and no, that you're right, but that leads me to my point. So if a guy's a 35th pick, that's not,
yeah. I mean it's that's great,
I
but yeah.
talked about this on Tuesday. Like we're drawing a line at a number and saying, okay, that's the number. So if you're 33, 34, 35, you're a second round pick. These are all great football players. My list is very similar. Love, Jagusa, Fields. I mean, there's
Oh
projections.
yeah, I got Fields. Yeah.
Drew, the story that you wrote the other day, one of the guys was talking about, oh, it was Brockermeyer, right?
Yes.
Yeah. By
Yeah,
the way,
they're two.
Brockermeyer said that he thinks Jagusa could be a guard in the NFL. That's a great concept. I never thought
I
of that.
think the
He
interesting
would.
thing about Jagusa guys is that if he is like an All-American guard for really, I mean, unless they win the title, then of course you just leave because you feel like it. But if he's like an All-American guard this year, and he's projected as an All-American guard to be the 20th pick, he could come back as a senior, be an All-American tackle, and be projected to be the sixth pick.
Yeah, that's a good point. Traore needs, I think,
Two years.
if we're following the question, you need a pass rusher that's a first rounder thereabouts, choice in order for Notre Dame to fully maximize, whether it's him and certainly Bryce Young, although I don't know that Bryce Young I don't think he'll be the pure pass rusher that Traore is, which is why, generally he's on the strong side. But Leonard Moore has a great chance to be a first rounder. And I realize that safeties don't go early. Again, if a Don Schuler goes 38th,
Well,
then
then Leonard. I mean, I would throw Billy Schroth if we're adding second-round
yeah,
picks.
oh
But
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Do you
hard to
think
say.
this is most potential first rounders they've had in a while? Like guys are like, oh, that's not like last year in the way too early mock drafts. Like Howard Cross is listed as a potential first rounder. I didn't take that very
No,
seriously. But
I,
like, if
I,
you're thinking realistically, are these guys like, okay, I could see this.
I think between first and second rounders, they're going to have a boatload of them.
Yes, first and second rounders, I agree. So I have I don't want to like do the old lead balloon here thing because Notre Dame's roster is way better than it was. But the last time I can think of potential first rounders people would talk about would have been the Rudolph, Floyd, Tate, Eifert, Teau. Am I missing
Yo,
one? Harrison Smith
yo,
years. There's six. They were potential first rounders. They weren't all first rounders, but that also should go to show you they're not all going to be first rounders. The problem is I didn't name an offensive or defensive lineman there, so that's why they weren't potential. That's why those things didn't work out so well. But that was a group of if we're sitting here in the April, May, and fans are talking about stuff and analysts on a podcast, who could go in the first round? 2010, you could throw six names out there.
yeah. Well, so we're talking about, and that's why I say Traore, you need that great pass rusher,
Mhm.
running back, offensive guard, wide receiver, offensive guard, corner, safety. You need to cover the gamut if you're going to be good, across the board. All right, we're going to wrap up with a double question here, one from NR Buckholz, and that is please weigh in on the 100 men versus gorilla debate. He has a second question. I'm going to set that one aside. And then David
You want to
Lopez.
answer the second one? I'm
I
pretty
do,
sure.
I do, yeah. And the second one from David Lopez. Do you think 100 current Notre Dame football players could defeat one silverback gorilla? I'm turning this over to you guys.
I want Drew to go first, but Drew, do you have? I pulled it up. Do you have the original tweet that brought this thing going? It was April 28th.
I don't have the original tweet.
All right, I
No.
pulled it up. It's just, I can't believe this is the original tweet. It's just some person. My husband says 100 men could easily defeat a gorilla by all piling on top of it and smothering it. I pointed out this would probably lead to a number of human casualties under the crush pile. He said, but bees can do it. That is how this all started. Go ahead. I'm going to turn over to Drew first, and then I will weigh in on the 100 Notre Dame players versus a gorilla.
So I did some research on this, and NBC News had a Dr. Tara Stoyski. I think I said that correctly. She's the president and CEO and chief scientific officer for the Diane Fossey Gorilla Fund.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Well, she knows that.
she said she wanted to make it clear like this has not been tested, so we can't say like, oh, we should lean this way. But she said she'd give the edge to the humans in part because like the sheer volume and amount of effort it would take the gorilla to defeat 100 humans would probably wear him down, whereas the humans could take breaks. And I think as it relates to Notre Dame football players, like humans also are intelligent and can coordinate and, work together. And you'd have to think if you had a guy like Notre Dame football players, they can talk about strategy and work together and find a way to defeat the gorilla. But I think that at the end of the day, it does come down to volume. Like you're going to have a lot of humans who don't fare very well, but ultimately people would be victorious.
I would like to add onto this. So Quentin Nelson is the captain of the team, obviously. But like I dig a little research on this as well. Tom Zibikowski doesn't help you because you can't punch a gorilla, you'll break your hand. And then he's just gonna eat you or bite you. So I don't know what you do because you also have to have at least 50 Notre Dame football players willing to give their lives for the other 50. I don't know about that. I'm pretty sure once you see a Tom Zibikowski get thrown around, they're not going to be jumping on in this fight anymore. So I say gorilla wins, Priester. You can't punch a gorilla. Quentin Nelson, who's your second pick? You can weigh in on your second pick. Hit Ross Browner history. Would you go Ross Browner for your
Yeah,
second
Brian,
pick?
maybe it's Zorich just because the anger that he brought to the football
He would
field
be
will be
willing to
necessary.
sacrifice.
I have to say, I wish I was clear-minded enough to give serious thought to these kind of things through the day. I've got other things to focus on, including the second question from in our Buckholz, which was, what is your home and home matchup you'd like to see in the near future? I don't know how they got tied in with this question, but it appealed to me a little bit more than the other one.
Before you answer, I want to point out you have as much control over this answer as you do the gorilla debate. But no, go ahead. There is no.
No, I asked the question. You guys go ahead and
All
start.
right. Drew, home and home for you. What do you want? This includes a trip, so that's why I always do the home and
So
home.
is
It
this
includes
okay?
the
Let me
trip.
just, is this, I mean, places you want to go?
Yes,
Because I
for
mean,
me
we
it is.
can, okay, we could name some matchups that
Hawaii.
aren't exactly what you're looking for with an already difficult schedule as you move forward.
So I thought of it, I didn't think of it that way. And I mean, as somebody who grew up here and like a lot of my family's from like just across the border in Michigan, like the Notre Dame Michigan series is like the one that always kind of meant the most to me growing up because like everyone I knew got involved and had a very strong opinion. Actually, growing up, it made me not like either of them because everyone had such strong opinions. But that was one. If I have to pick a place, I would probably pick Ole Miss. Like I have never been to Mississippi. That's a place I want to go, and I've also just heard how beautiful the campus is and the tailgating. I think that in terms of like the college football pageantry would be something I really want to see. And again, I don't have another reason why I'm going to go to Mississippi.
I drove through Mississippi once on the way home from a wedding and bachelor party in New Orleans, and I felt a little ill the next day. And I blame Mississippi's Taco Bell, not the 72 hours in New Orleans. So go ahead, Tim.
I hear what you're saying, Drew, about Michigan. Just not, I'm not sure that you want to go back into that because especially like, it used to be many times it was the first game of the year and man, you really don't want something like that. I think, I'd say Indiana, so Kurt Signetti could get his ass kicked again by Notre Dame at home and at Notre Dame Stadium again. Um,
You are not thinking far enough outside the box if you're looking to drive to Bloomington for the weekend.
oh no, okay, no,
Okay,
I'm just
good.
saying from a different perspective, I mean, places that I think Notre Dame at Oregon. I was covering Notre Dame in '83, but I wasn't going to all the games at that point. And Notre Dame played
13-13
there
tie,
to a
one of the first games I remember.
13-13 tie. It's beautiful. I'd like Notre Dame fans to see how beautiful Oregon is. I would say UCLA just because of an opportunity to go back to the Rose Bowl. I do want Notre Dame to play in a legitimate Rose Bowl in Pasadena. Notre Dame played in a Rose Bowl, but it wasn't. It was in Texas because of the pandemic. LSU. I mean, I think LSU would be a pretty
Yeah.
under the current
Yes. Good
situation
call.
and setup. I think that would be cool. Going back to Texas, that is such a great college town. Mississippi would be great. I haven't been there since I played I think we played a doubleheader at Mississippi in the spring of '82. So that'd be kind of cool to go to. Wyoming. I know
Oh, that
nobody really wants to play Wyoming,
my my
but I
dad
think
went
that
to
would
Wa
be
sorry, my dad went to the University of Wyoming, so that
there you
would be
go.
his dream matchup for sure.
I mean,
There you
Drew hit
go.
on Ole Miss. That was one of mine. Priester on Oregon was definitely one of my. I've never been to the out to Autzen Stadium, so I want to go there. So Michigan, Drew's a great point. Michigan, you just bring a whole new level of fan. I mean, they hate each other more now than they did then when we were
Yeah.
growing up going to those games. Like
Yeah.
the hatred level of Michigan now because they won the title and the way they won it is huge from Notre Dame fans. I actually think enough time has passed where the LSU game would be fun. Whereas the first year, remember, we didn't want to have Notre Dame play LSU in a bowl game because they're a couple of 8-4 teams, and that's not the you didn't want to see that. You want to see it mean something. I
Yeah.
would love if LSU is coming to Notre Dame this year. Notre Dame is going there the next year. But my answer is always Thanksgiving Saturday, Hawaii, home and home, or Pepperdine. Does Pepperdine have a FPS team yet?
I don't think they do.
Okay,
I don't
Pepperdine,
think they do.
Hawaii are on there. Wyoming's a good call though, pretty sure for outside the box. That would be a fun one. You're almost getting Boise State halfway through. That'd be kind of
Yeah.
fun too to go see the
Yeah.
blue turf. Also, I don't know if the Silverback Gorilla would like to come to Notre Dame, or they'd have to go to his home because that would be a rough one. I'm voting Silverback Gorilla official. Priester, Gorilla, or 100 Notre Dame players.
Oh, I'm gonna have to go with the gorilla because of all the reasons that you mentioned. Hey, I want to throw something in here. We've been getting a lot of compliments about the people on our podcast. People are still saying what a great addition John Bryce is. Bryce's been with us for a long time and he's a fantastic addition. But I want to point out because more of our subscribers are pointing out what a great job Drew Mentak is doing. He is fantastic. Everything that he does for our website, and he's become quite accustomed to joining us on the podcast. And I just want to give a shout out to Drew and agree with the people that are pointing out what a great job Drew Mentak is doing for Irish Illustrated.
I concur, Drew, except for the Michigan idea. I think that might be more than biting off a little more than you want to chew when you're trying to cover that game in these days.
That's probably fair. And thank you guys for saying that. I appreciate the opportunity to kind of join you guys in this and learn from you on it too. So
That is it for this edition of Irish Illustrated Insider. We'll be back on May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, for our normal Monday. Until then, for Drew Mentok and Tim Priester of Irish Illustrated, I am Tim O'Malley. Thanks for listening and enjoy your weekend portal free.